Good evening, everyone. I am not Matt McBrayer, regardless of what your bulletin may say. At least the copy I got, I think was today's date, said he would be the speaker this evening, but guess what? Not here. I'm Gary Workman, your missionary to Ukraine. My wife is Nadia, sitting here with Ukrainian flag colors around her neck, gold and blue. That's the color of the Ukrainian flag. She is a native Ukrainian, and so we are partners in mission work to her home country of Ukraine and beyond, in Belarus and Poland as well. So I'm putting that up there on the screen, and I hope that all of you can see that. Thank you for turning the lights. That'll help a little, I'm sure. So let me back it up here. There's our names right there, and working in Ukraine, Belarus, and Poland. Well, Russia is the big news, these days for Ukraine, and so there it is in red, and Ukraine down on the lower left there, and Belarus is just up above Ukraine, also bordering on Russia. But let's start with Ukraine. Here's how it looks in gold, with Russia being the green country on the north and east side. And of course, the war has been going on that everybody knows about. I'm sure all of you know about that. 21 months now, plus about 10 days. Started February 24th last year, and totaling up to right now, today, 648 days of war. Well, that's a lot, especially for a small country like Ukraine. By the way, the size of Ukraine is almost identical to Texas. If you would chop off half the Texas panhandle, then the rest of what you have left of Texas is the size of Ukraine. But Texas has way more people. I said it backwards. Ukraine has way more people, at least did, but there's a big influx going into Texas these days, and there's an exodus out of Ukraine, so we don't know how it may all end up. But looking at this map right here, you see the red zone all around the eastern and southern part of Ukraine. That's occupied territory. So to one extent or another, Russian forces are in that area and fighting head-to-head against Ukrainian soldiers. That's Crimea that you see at the bottom end there. And that's the Black Sea that it is a peninsula into. If you were to catch a boat on the southern end of Crimea and go straight south, you would land on the northern shore of Turkey, almost exactly where Aquila, of the couple Priscilla and Aquila in the New Testament, almost exactly where he came from. So Ukraine is almost Bible territory. In fact, in one sense it is, because Paul, in the book of Colossians, chapter 4, referred to the Scythians. That was the Ukrainians. If you were to ask a Ukrainian, who were your people originally, they would say, well, we were the Scythi. That's how they pronounce that, Scythi. They use a F where we have a TH, and so they are the Scythians. Well, anyway, Russian missiles flying all the time. Nadia just got back from 3 months in Ukraine. She went over in late August, just got back the other day, almost over her jet lagging by now, I think. And she said that Russian missiles were flying day and night, air raid sirens going on all the time, drones are being sent in there. And so it just keeps everybody in a panic because they don't know where those drones and those missiles are going to land. A lot of people have ended up homeless, and this is sort of what their residence might have looked like. This is one of them. So a lot of damage has been done, especially to the infrastructure. Last year, about 50% of Ukraine's infrastructure was damaged by Russian missiles. I mean, at the end of last year, in the winter time or the early part of this year. And the word is out now among Ukrainians that it looks like that Russia wants to take out all of Ukraine's infrastructure and and essentially freeze everybody to death and win the war that way. So we don't know. It's a lot of it is hearsay. We never know exactly what the real situation may be. Poltava is the name of a city. That's our home base in Ukraine. This is our church building, and if you can see in the shadow up there at the top, it says Cerkva Hristova, that's Church of Christ in the Ukrainian language. And yes, we do have those beautiful rose bushes in front of the church building. But in the fall, as the leaves were changing, this is how it looked, and there's Nadia standing in front of it. She, by the way, planted those trees with her own bare hands a few years back. And so there we are in a building that originally was a restaurant that we, by the Lord's providence, were able to buy a few years back and turned it into our Poltava church building on a 6-lane major boulevard. So it's just a real windfall for us in the Lord's gift of his providence, we feel like, and that's where a lot of activity has been going on lately. Well, despite the war, I'm going to come back to the war before I finish this out toward the end of my remarks this evening, but despite the war, the preaching of the gospel never stops in Ukraine. So here's some views inside our Poltava church building with some of our preachers. They came in, and some of them were coming in, some of them were there, and preaching and teaching in that building this fall. This man here, his name is Vladimir Karlov, and he's our right-hand man in the Poltava congregation, just a jack of all trades, so to speak. Nadia did a lot of teaching. She's got a lot of great organizational skills, and when she got over there in the fall, she got with these men, and they devised invitations that they put out in front of the church building, inviting people to come in for Bible studies. And would you believe, the first day that came into operation, I think there were about 35 visitors that day. Then it went up to 40 or 50, then 60, then 70 or 80. Then it got up to 100. Finally, before it was all said and done, more than 200 different people came into the Poltava church building, and there were so many wanting to get in there all at the same time, they ran out of room. At first, they squeezed them in standing room only, and then finally they had to lock the door to keep more people from coming in because there was simply no way to get them inside the building. So they ended up teaching in between Sundays 20 group lessons per week inside that building. They were going on for 5 or 6 hours a day with multiple group sessions and teaching these people who were clamoring to hear the gospel of Christ, many of whom said, "We have never heard lessons like this before." It was just an amazing turnout, and when I was getting these daily reports from Nadia, I thought, this is like the beginning of the Restoration Movement almost. Back in the summer, we decided to divide our efforts. We'd been, because of the war, because of COVID, things like that, we've been working our mission work online with online meetings, but Nadia said, "I think I can get in there and safely get to Poltava." All the airports are shut down in the country. It had to get in by train. She said, I'm willing to go. And so we decided to divide efforts. She would go, I would keep on doing the online thing. And so she was sending me the reports back, and I thought, this is really something that during a time of war, they were able to do that much. Well, back to the picture. Handing out lots of Bibles to these visitors, says Biblia on the front. That's how you say Bible in Ukrainian or Russian language. And some of these people, by the way, never held a Bible in their hands before. Some of them never even saw a Bible. And so look at this. One of the group sessions. Look at all these people in there. This, like I said, was a restaurant that we bought, and when we bought it, they left behind all the furniture. So we got all the tables, all the chairs, and everything. So fortunately, that came into great use for us, but squeezing all those people in there especially into one big room, we get them into the biggest room. It's about half the size of this one, and then we had other rooms, but they were jammed in tight, and all these group studies just kept taking place throughout the fall. Children's classes as well. That again says Biblia on that children's Bible that the little girl is holding and the little boy there. And then that led to conversions like this woman here and this man here. And so a lot of success came our way this fall. And we're so happy to be able to tell you about it. Humanitarian aid is a big part of our work these days because of the war going on. So there's Nadia in a grocery store loading up supplies and then our guys helping to unload that into the church building, stacking it in our pantry, and then handing it out to needy people. A lot of these people, almost everyone you see in this picture, is displaced from war zones and just living on what little subsistence the country can hand out to displaced people, and they're totally dependent on any money like that from Western sources. So that's why we hope that aid packages like they're talking about in Washington, D.C. these days will go through, and there will be more aid sent to Ukraine, because otherwise Ukraine can't do it by themselves. So all that you see in those white sacks in the previous shot there, and these blue sacks in this shot, that's humanitarian aid, food to keep these people alive. And then we have some people in our Poltava congregation who go out and find these needy people, and so here they go into this home and this home and this home and this one, handing out supplies to people who simply have no way to travel in to get it. But we have ways of finding out who the needy people are. So before Nadia left, already the cold weather was setting in. You get snow before winter hits, and there she is in front of our church building just before coming home last Thursday. So now moving on to another place. Our mission work involves not only that city of Poltava, but also a number of other places where we have preachers, where we support the work, we support the preachers, we fund the humanitarian aid that's going on. Of course, it's not us doing it, it's people like you really doing it, because you're supporting it, and we simply take those funds and dispense them where they need to go. So now we're going to go to this city called Kamyansk. And I have on the graphic there left bank, because we have a left bank church and a right bank church, two sides of the river, and the major river of Ukraine, which is like our Mississippi and about that big, flows right down through that city, the river Dnieper. And so here we are. This man, Vladimir Vorobyov is his name, and he is the preacher of the Left Bank Church. Wonderful guy. Exactly 20 years younger than I am to the very day, so we never forget each other's birthdays. And it's always a competition between us to see who can say happy birthday first to the other one. Another preacher there, we have two men working together, and so this one here is also working with him, and his name is Sergei Ponomarenko. Sergei, that's the Russian or Ukrainian version of Sergius, like so you have a Sergius in the New Testament, and you have it's a common name in practically all languages of the world. I think they have a version of that. And so here's inside the Left Bank building, which we own. We were able to buy that about more than 15 years ago now. It's been about like 20 years ago. We bought that 8,000 square foot basement, or not basement, but ground floor of an apartment building for $16,000, $2 a square foot. Pretty good bargain, I think. We were just thrilled when that came our way and could hardly believe the opportunity when we snatched that up those years back. Right bank now, Kamyansk, same city across the river. And this young man, his name is Ilya. That's Elijah to us. That if you look in a Russian or Ukrainian Bible and read about Elijah the prophet, it'll say Ilya, and that's his name. I've known this boy since he was a boy, since he was about 7 or 8 years old. And he was one of my little guys that I was able to teach. I converted his older brother, who then brought him to our Bible classes and worship meetings, and he eventually became a preacher, and then here's his lovely family. His wife, Zinaida. Nadia knew her when she was 7 or 8 years old and helped to teach English to her. And she lived far away from where her husband grew up, but youth meetings were organized in the country. They met each other at one of these youth meetings and fell in love, got married, now got the family of 5, and he's one of our preachers on the right bank of Kamyansk, working with this other young man whose name is Eljun. Now that is not a Slavic name. Slavic people are Russians and Ukrainians. This young man is from Azerbaijan, and those people in that country are of Turkish ancestry. So he's working alongside Ilya, and this young man is a people magnet. I mean, I don't know anybody who can find people better than he can. He goes out and brings them in, and then Ilya is great at teaching, so they kind of work together. One finds the other teaches in a lot of these cases, and so that's working hand in hand has really produced a lot of success for the Right Bank Church in Kamyansk. Here they're doing street evangelism. So they go out when it's warm weather, well, sometimes when it's cold weather, put up tables, put out literature, people come by. It's a pedestrian country. Only a small fraction of people own cars, and I don't think more than 5% of the adult population has a driver's license, and so that's beyond their means to own cars for most people, and so it's a pedestrian country, and people walking around all the time, up and down sidewalks everywhere, and so they stop at these tables, they pick up literature, they're impressed by the literature. The people behind the tables say, well, come and meet with us in our Bible classes, and they do, and many conversions take place as a result. Many Bible studies leading to conversions. Here's a shot of one of their, I think this is a midweek meeting, and so they're meeting in a rather large auditorium, not quite as big as this one maybe, but pretty good size. And then sometimes they're meeting outdoors in warm weather, especially and going out to a village, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. But all these Bible studies here, lots of youth work. So many people have been converted in the Right Bank Church of Kamyansk. That congregation was started in May of 1994. And I was one of the instigators of it. We had a campaign group of, I think it was 12 of us. We went in there with the help of the Left Bank Church that was already in existence for a few months. And so we got them, recruited them to go over to the other side of the river, help us start a new congregation. I preached the first sermon, and I was the first regular preacher till the end of the year of 1994. And that's how this congregation got started, and it's been going great ever since. You see what they're doing here, humanitarian aid. Again, a lot of help handed out to the needy, and most of those needy are refugees from the eastern and southern areas where they are the hot spots of the war. Here's a recent shot of their Sunday assembly in the Right Bank Church of Kamyansk. And here's an outdoor Bible class taking place, and I mentioned the village. Now we're going to go to that village of Plaveshina. So the people who are members of the Right Bank Church in Kamyansk go out to this outlying village where we planted a congregation. I was involved in that too. Many years back, I think it's been about 25 years now since we planted this work. And summer Bible camps take place out there, but there's also a regular congregation year-round out there, and lots of young people involved in it. All these people were brought out to that village. They were met in a train station. They landed, or disembarked, I should say, off the train, having come out of a war zone, not knowing where they're going to go. They just knew they had to get away somewhere. And they were met by our Christian people, invited out to the village, given housing, and so that's how the outreach goes. And if you touch people with your care and concern, you can easily teach those people and get them to become Christians. And so many conversions took place. Now, the third largest city in Ukraine is now called Dnipro. It used to be Dnipropetrovsk, named after the Dnieper River and the early communist leader Petrovsky, but they've purged out all the communistic names now. They don't want to celebrate that anymore, so it's Dnipro. And our young man, Eljun, that I was showing you a picture of, travels over to the city of Dnipro and also works this congregation as their preacher. So one preacher, in this case, serving 3 different congregations, and that's not unusual in Ukraine. We have more congregations than we have preachers. So sometimes some traveling has to take place. And so that's just the reality of the mission work in Ukraine. Now moving on to another city, Zaporozhye. We started this work in the year, I'm pretty sure it was 2002, when I said to a convert of mine who wanted to preach, I said, okay, we have one known Christian in the city of Zaporozhye. How about if you go there, find that woman, and there'll be 2 of you, and you start a congregation. He said, okay. And what you're going to see now is the result of that effort. All these people converted since then, and this is post-COVID I'm showing you here. There were twice this many before COVID hit and before the war began. So these are recent pictures, but all these young people here in this picture and these people here who are refugees from war zones meeting, not all of these are Christians, but they're in our Bible classes. And our people there in that congregation go out to where these people are housed in the temporary housing you can see on the right and left side of this picture. And they hold Bible studies out there on the bench, or they go into their homes when the weather is cold. They give them Bibles like this. They give them food and clothing even if they need it. One of our converts along the way was a man by the name of Yuri Taran. He was a drug addict when we found him recovering in a hospital. And he had decided his life was no good the way he had been living it, and he was ready to reform. We found him in that frame of mind, converted him, and then he wanted to become a preacher, and he started being the preacher there in Zaporozhye. But when the war broke out 21 months ago, since he had children, he decided he better get out of that hotspot, because this is the place where there's a nuclear reactor that Russia has taken hold of, and they're occupying that nuclear reactor and they're threatening to blow it up. So we don't know what may happen. So Yuri decided he better get out of there for the safety of his family. He got into Warsaw, Poland, and I'm going to show you now what he's doing in Warsaw. There he is with his wife and Nadia, and that was taken just last week as she was coming back home. She had to go by train, 20-hour train ride across Ukraine into the city of Helm, Poland, and then another train up to Warsaw where she spent the night, met with Yuri and Yulia, his wife, and then flew out the next day. So what I'm showing you now is, there's Yuri right there in front and sitting in the seat, and there he is up teaching the congregation that he started just after he got out when the war started. Look at all these people and all those. This is what he was able to accomplish just inside the 21 months of this war. So you can see why we're thrilled with how the mission work is going, that we're doing among the Slavic people of Eastern Europe. And so all those people that you see in that picture, they're all, I think probably every last one of them is a Ukrainian. They're in Warsaw now, but they want to go home. They want this war to be over, and they don't intend to stay in Poland. They want to go back to their home country. So all this effort leads to conversions. There's Yuri baptizing this one, and so many more. We don't have time to show all the pictures. But again, engaged in humanitarian aid, accumulating provisions, and handing them out to the needy. Now I'm going to go to two more places, Kramatorsk and Brovary, and tell you about a young man by the name of Nazar. And there he is. To look at his picture, you might think, oh, well, 14 years old. He's really, I think his age is 23 now. And his father is a preacher. His grandfather is a preacher. He's third generation preacher in this family of preachers, and he's just a crackerjack of a preacher. I'm so thrilled with him. He attended and graduated from the Bear Valley School of Preaching, their extension school in Ukraine, and graduated with high marks in doing a great job in these cities. Here again, a lot of humanitarian aid. So what you're looking at there is a table with food on it. And here he is working in the congregation in Brovary, where he lives. And then he travels to this other congregation, Kramatorsk, where he especially works with young people. And they don't have a regular preacher in Kramatorsk right now. So here again, street evangelism, a major part of his work, putting literature out on tables, attracting passers who come by, and interesting them in the gospel of Christ, like this young man stopping to take a look. Here is his fellow worker in the Brovary congregation, another Ilya, and he is the son of the man who I considered to be the finest Ukrainian preacher we had. But unfortunately, COVID took him out. He died with COVID a year ago. And it was a very sad event for a lot of us, because his father was a wonderful man, not only a preacher, but also an instructor in the Bear Valley Extension School in Ukraine. And he's now gone, but his widow is still left there. She lives in that town. She's doing a lot of Christian work, especially humanitarian aid. Her son Ilya is doing teaching, preaching, humanitarian aid, and so they're working together. That's me and Nazar. Before I decided to grow the facial hair, we were into the COVID pandemic until Nadia said one day, "How come you didn't grow a beard during the pandemic?" I said, "Good idea." I stopped shaving that very day. And so, anyway, we're waiting that out. But that's Nazar right there, just a wonderful young man. Now we're going to move outside of Ukraine again. We were in Poland there for a little bit. Now we're going to go out again, this time into the country of Belarus, which is just above Ukraine. There is Ukraine, the bigger country, and Belarus right above it. The smaller country, Russia bordering both countries on the east. And Belarus is a close associate of Russia. I mean, the president of Belarus and the president of Russia, they're just buddies. So they are in total cooperation with Russia on this war against Ukraine, with only one difference, and that is Belarus has not physically attacked Ukraine, although Russia has attacked Ukraine from Belarus territory. So there they are, right there above Ukraine. If they were to go against Ukraine on their own, they couldn't possibly win a war because they're much smaller. But you see Russia now up there, the word Russia, and then those 6 regions of the country of Belarus. Now you see this arrow? up there pointing to a red dot, that's where our congregation is, 10 miles from the Russian border in the city of Gorky. The only other congregation in the entire country of Belarus is in the capital city of Minsk. And if your eyes were real good, you might be able to see if I can get around here and point to it, I will. Right there is the capital city of Minsk. We have one congregation there and one right there in the city of Gorky. That's it for the whole country. They, in that country, are very old guard, and like Putin of Russia, they regret that the Soviet Union does not still exist. And therefore, they don't want Christian work. They have this old guard mentality. The only difference between their mentality and what used to exist in the Soviet Union is they're not communistic anymore. That's gone. But that makes it hard for an American to get into Belarus to do any kind of Christian work. But locals like these two can do it. So we have here Igor and his wife Katya, and they were our converts in Poltava, Ukraine, and went back to her native country of, he's Ukrainian, went back to her native country of Belarus after their conversion, and within 2 months, I think it was less than 3 months, we got word from him. He said, I'm ready to start a congregation and be the preacher of it. And said 3 months after conversion. So we said, okay. We bought him that house you see behind them there and turned that into this combination preacher's home and church meeting place. And so they live there, the church meets there, and they have this congregation going. It's not a large congregation, but they're doing everything they can in a very difficult place to evangelize, where the official position is very much against Christian work. And so they're able to do a lot of good. They made quite a few converts, and so some of them are no longer in the congregation. They moved off to other places. But anyway, this family, now with 5 of them in the family, are doing a good work for the Lord, and so our Belarusian work. So again, like I had on the graphic at the beginning, we're working in Ukraine, we're working in Warsaw, Poland, we're working in Belarus, and all of that is a part of our work. Now I want to mention this online work that I mentioned earlier when I said Nadia and I divided up activities. She would go to Ukraine, I would continue on with the online work. We have daily prayer meetings except for Saturday. So prayer meetings Monday through Friday, worship on Sunday, all of it digital, all of it online. And so that is done through the blessings of the internet. So here is Igor in Belarus that we were just looking at, and he's got his phone. He can see my face on his phone. We're connected online. We're conducting a prayer meeting or worship, one or the other, when he had his wife snap this picture. And I'm sitting at my desk in Arlington, Texas. That's a Ukrainian flag behind me. And I'm looking at Nazar at this moment on my phone, and because we're connected by this platform that's kind of like Zoom. Some of you are familiar with Zoom. Well, we don't use Zoom in our connection. We use one that's more familiar to people over there, and it's called Viber. And so, but it works the same, about the same as Zoom. And so we're all connected digitally at the same time, live worship. So we can have a man in one country lead a prayer, a man in another country lead the singing. Everybody can hear and participate. And that's the blessings of the state of the internet these days. So here's Nazar sitting at his desk in Brovary, and he's got his computer there, he's got his phone propped up in front of the screen, he's looking at our connection on his phone, and he's delivering the message of the hour. Here he is reading from his Bible with the phone right there, picking up everything that he's saying and sending that out to people in 6 different countries at the same time. And so he sees us looking like this on his phone, and we have people that we connect with that we had lost. We had lost track of some people. We tracked them down. We found a girl in Italy. She was one of our converts early on in the work. I've been doing this work in Ukraine for 30 years. It was 1993 in the summer when I first went over and decided, okay, this is going to be my work from now on. And so I finished 30 years of it, now already into the 31st year. I put this picture on here to tell you something about these people. When I arrived in Kiev in the summer of 1993, I think one of the first, if not the very first woman I met was the mother of this bearded man on the right. She was a teacher of English. She spoke fluent English, perfect grammar. Her son, who was 19 plus years at that time, spoke fluent English. His name is Bogdan. Wonderful name, by the way. It means gift of God. Bog is God in Russian language and Ukrainian language. And Don means given by God. That's his name, Bogdan. So he was somebody I met on my very first meeting with any Christians in Ukraine 30 years ago. He is still with us. And we connect online. He's one of these connections that we have every single time we do these online connections. Now, the other two, the woman there is his first cousin, and her aunt was his mother, the one I just mentioned, who was the very first Christian woman I met in Ukraine. And I lived with Lena and her husband, Ivan, for most of 1994. After we started that congregation on the right bank of Kamyanskaya, I was living in their apartment through the end of the year. When I left the preaching work of that congregation, turned it over to another American, and went to start the congregation in Poltava. And so those folks are very close to me. Their daughter eventually married an American boy, and they are living in the U.S., and so now their parents, Yvonne and Lena there, are also in the U.S., but connecting with us for these online prayer meetings and worship. So there again, even in the U.S., we're connected by all this activity. I want to go back to the war now. Millions are displaced because of it. And, you know, when that happens to your home, you're no longer living there, of course. And so this woman is taking what she was able to scrape up, put in the wheelbarrow, and I don't know where she's going with it, and whole neighborhoods, whole villages look like this a lot of times. Russia took out one major city completely, lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, they destroyed life in a city of over 200,000 people because they wanted the territory. They didn't care how many people they killed. They wanted the territory. So many places where people used to live are now just ruins and shambles, and that's why you have displaced people. Here are these people escaping their burning house. And this old man looking at where he used to live, rescuing a few animals along the way, going back to see what it used to look like, and people just crying their hearts out over the loss, not knowing where they're ever going to end up living. So that's why displaced people, or otherwise we say refugees. Ukraine is doing its best to defend its people and its land, but look at Ukraine, the size of Texas, and Russia is so big it has 11 time zones. So how can little Ukraine ever hope to win a war against gigantic Russia, the biggest territorial country in the world? Well, the only way they can do it is with outside help. And that's why if we and if Western Europe continue to help them, then we think they can survive and even win this war. But it's going to take a lot of outside help for them to do it. And they've lost an awful lot of soldiers by now, by the way. They're young people, even if they can't do anything but throw a Molotov cocktail like this boy is doing, well, that's what they can do. By the way, you can take out a tank with a Molotov cocktail if you know where to put it. And they do know believe me. I told you the bearded young man I showed in the picture, I said he was 19 years old when I first met him on my first day in Ukraine. There he is, drafted into the Army now at the age of 50. But because of his age, not sent to the front line, thankfully, but still drafted into the Army. But he's in contact with us every single day in our online meetings. Here's a young man. His name is Vlad. We converted him in Poltava, and he's drafted into the Army. Here's another one. This is an Igor. He's the son of one of our longtime members in the Poltava congregation. His mother is such a faithful Christian, drafted into the Army. We don't know how many of these are going to survive. That's El June again that I mentioned, who was the Azerbaijanian and a people magnet. One of the young men that they converted in Kamyanskaya, there he is, right there. His name is Kolya, or it's actually Nikolai, but Kolya is the nickname, and drafted into the Army. We don't know if he'll survive. These two are not in my converts. And the man in the Army outfit, and his wife there on the left, and his son on the right. So he was drafted into the Army, sent to the front line, given the job of planting mines for the enemy soldiers just over the rise. So he'd come out of his foxhole at night, crawl through the underbrush with 65 pounds of armament on him, placing mines there in the ground and sliding back into his foxhole. Finally, he was released from the front lines because he has children, and he was let go back to his family. We're so thankful he didn't lose his life in the war, because we converted these people less than a year ago. So we didn't want to lose him in that war. Half of Ukraine's children are now homeless. And they just sleep wherever they can find a place, and wherever the country can find a place to put them. So here's a bunch of them in a subway station, and there's subways in Kiev, underground, trains, and these were built, by the way back in Soviet times, to be a combination subway and bomb shelter in case America ever bombed their country. Well, guess who's bombing it? Russia, not America. We're their ally. Russia's their enemy. And so things are just exactly reversed from how they were back in Soviet days. And so empty warehouses, empty buildings of one sort or another. Children are just stacked in there. A lot of them have no parents any longer because they were lost in the war attacks. And so a tremendous amount of orphans and homeless children. And again, I say half of Ukrainians' children are now said to be homeless. But in spite of all these travesties, people are turning to God, and all these baptisms I'm showing you right now all took place since this war began. A lot of people taking serious thought about their lives and thinking, maybe I better turn to God while I'm still alive. I don't know how many breaths I have left. And so they're more serious about it. It's kind of reminds me of Acts 8. Great persecution arose against the church after the stoning of Stephen, and the disciples were scattered. Remember that? And went everywhere preaching the word. Well, that's what's going on in Ukraine. Evangelism has increased as a result of the war, not decreased. Now, the question, what can we do? Number one, pray for Ukraine, and pray that little children like this won't have to fear for their lives anymore. That's the Ukrainian flag the little girl is holding, representing the blue sky above, the golden wheat fields below. Nadia dresses up like a Ukrainian flag. She's got these colors on tonight, but she sometimes puts on that t-shirt and just goes into stores here in the U.S. with "Stand with Ukraine" written on it, just to help promote goodwill toward Ukraine. And here's something you need to know if you haven't heard it before. We didn't start evangelizing Ukraine until the Soviet Union ended. It ended in December 1991. I was in there a year and a half later, summer of 1993, and started my work, so it's 30 and a half years now. In this period of time, we now have more brothers and sisters in Christ in the one country of Ukraine than in all the rest of Europe put together. Even though evangelism has been going on in lots of places in Western Europe, especially since World War II, we have more in Ukraine than all the rest of Europe. That's how successful Ukrainian evangelism is. So that's why we ask you and beg you, pray for Ukraine. Pray for us as we work this field. Pray for the people that we depend on inside Ukraine, our preachers and our workers there. Support Ukrainian evangelism. You know, we get support from people like you. We send it on over to them. They use it. They get the food. They support, they get their livelihood from it. They're able to live because of it. And they are engaged in ongoing preaching and teaching. There's one of our congregations right there, wartime view of it, in Kamyansk, Ukraine. Help feed the hungry. Well, that's part of what I was just talking about. Funds go toward buying all provisions like this, and we stack them up in pantries. We're fortunate to own several church buildings over there. We stack them up in our pantries and then hand them out on a regular basis to all the people that we encounter who are hungry and in need of something. So support outreach to displaced people is another thing. I'm talking about giving them a place to stay. So all these people were met in a train station, and our guys said, we can house you. Just come with us. And these people here, same thing. And they especially took them out to the village where we own several homes and are able to put them in those homes and take care of them. Millions have fled the country and millions more want to, but look at the biggest blue arrow there. You see where they're going? Into Poland. But they don't want to stay there. They want to come back out and get back into Ukraine. And so almost all of them are hoping to get back home when this war is over. Pray that the war will come to an end, and a good end, with Ukraine not losing its territory to Russia. And by the way, Russia is not the mother of Ukraine. Ukraine is the mother of Russia. The Russian Empire began in the capital city of Kiev, Ukraine, and then migration took place north and across Asia, and that became Russia. It was Kievsky Rus, the name of the empire, when it began, and that's where Russia came from. Ukraine is the mother of Russia. Ukraine is crying for help, and it's an urgent appeal on our part. So please keep supporting Ukraine. Increase your support if you can. We can use all the funds we can get, and the more funds we get, the more we can do. And so thank you very much for listening to this appeal and report this evening. When I see this picture of Nadia and me, I know it's the end. You can turn the lights back on if you like now. Thank you very much for your wonderful attention to what I had to say. And I do hope you will meet Nadia, by the way, before you leave here this evening. We don't want to close this hour without giving an opportunity to anyone who may be in need of the Lord in some way, and our help as well. And so we ask you, maybe you're on the verge of becoming a Christian. Maybe you're teeter-tottering on the brink of a decision. If you have belief in your heart, faith in your heart, repentance in your soul, you're ready to put a confession of Jesus on your lips, you can be baptized into Christ, immersed into water, and raised to walk in a newness of life and be a Christian as you walk out of this building this evening, and we'll help you do that. Or if you're already a Christian but in need of maybe God's forgiveness for some reason, or God's help maybe with some problem in your life, we'll be glad to take your name before the throne of grace if you'll just let us know what that need is. And so if we can help you, please let us do so. And if you can, meet us down at the front. Let's stand and sing the invitation song.
There's a great day coming.